The C-rank mission. Asuma stood before the Hokage, arms casually crossed, but his eyes focused and intent. The usual laid-back demeanor he carried had shifted, replaced with the sharp focus that only came when he had a purpose in mind. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, looked up from the mission scrolls with a raised eyebrow. "A C-rank mission, Asuma?" he asked, his tone slightly surprised. "Are you certain they're ready for that kind of responsibility?" Asuma nodded without hesitation. "Absolutely. They've made significant progress, and I believe they are prepared for something beyond the village walls. I want to see how they handle themselves in a real-world situation." The Hokage leaned back in his chair, considering Asuma's words. He'd kept a close eye on Naruto, Shikamaru, and Hinata's growth under Asuma's guidance, and knew they had each shown unique potential. With a thoughtful hum, he finally spoke. "Very well," Hiruzen said, reaching for a scroll with a faded but still vibrant seal. "I have a mission that might be a good fit. It's technically a C rank." He handed the scroll to Asuma, his gaze serious but approving. "Escort duty. You'll be accompanying a bridge builder from the Land of Waves named Tazuna back to his village. He's expressed concerns about bandits in the area." Asuma took the scroll and gave a slight nod, his eyes glinting with excitement. "Understood. We'll handle it." He gave the Hokage a respectful bow before leaving the office, feeling a renewed sense of anticipation for the mission ahead. The next morning, Team 10 gathered at the village gates. Each member was eager, yet carrying their own set of expectations about what the mission would entail. Naruto stood silently, his expression unreadable as he adjusted the kunai holster on his leg. Shikamaru, yawning with his hands in his pockets, looked more bothered than excited, while Hinata fidgeted, clearly nervous but determined. Asuma arrived, leading an older, unassuming man with a scruffy beard and a large bottle slung over his shoulder. "Everyone, meet Tazuna," Asuma announced, "our client for this mission." Tazuna looked over the young shinobi with a slight squint, clearly unimpressed. "So, these kids are supposed to protect me?" he muttered, scratching his head. "Looks like I might be doing all the work." Team 10 gathered at the mission assignment building, their expressions a mix of curiosity and anticipation. They knew Asuma had pushed for something beyond the usual, and though none of them showed it outright, each of them hoped for a mission that would challenge their growing skills. Naruto met his gaze, his face as unreadable as ever. "Actions speak louder than words," he said simply, his tone cold but steady. Before Tazuna could respond, Naruto moved, his form flickering out of sight. In an instant, several illusionary clones of him appeared, each standing in different positions around Tazuna, their silent stares focused intently on the bridge builder. Tazuna blinked, clearly caught off guard by the display, as he glanced around, mildly impressed. "Well, at least you've got some tricks up your sleeve," he muttered, shifting uneasily. Naruto's clones faded as he returned to his original position, hands in his pockets, unfazed by the demonstration. Shikamaru smirked slightly, watching Tazuna's reaction, while Hinata gave a quiet nod of approval. Asuma stepped forward, addressing Tazuna with a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, Tazuna-san. Team 10 may be young, but they're capable. We'll get you to the Land of Waves safely." Tazuna gave a reluctant nod, adjusting his glasses as he cast one last glance at Naruto. "Fine then, let's hope you're as good as you look." The mission began smoothly enough. The path was well worn and devoid of obstacles, with Tazuna plodding along and occasionally grumbling about the weight of his bags. Team 10 remained vigilant, but the atmosphere was calm, almost too calm. As they walked, Hinata activated her Byakugan periodically, scanning the area for any unusual movement. It was during one of these checks that her eyes narrowed, catching sight of two faint chakra signatures lying in wait among the trees ahead. Her voice was barely a whisper as she leaned toward Shikamaru. "Two, hiding in the trees ahead. Their chakra is masked, but I can see them." Shikamaru's eyes flickered toward the tree line, his usual lazy gaze sharpening. "Got it. Let's keep moving, but act like we haven't noticed anything." He subtly gestured to Asuma and Naruto, who each gave a slight nod in understanding. They moved forward, maintaining their casual pace while silently preparing for the encounter. As they approached the trees where the ambush was set, Shikamaru whispered his plan to Hinata. "I'll cover the shadows. When they make their move, block their path. We'll catch them from both sides." Hinata nodded, her eyes fixed on their surroundings as they continued. Just as they neared the ambush point, two figures burst out from the shadows, their chains swinging through the air as they lunged forward to ensnare their targets. The notorious demon brothers, shinobi from the land of mist, had sprung their trap, but Team 10 was ready. Shikamaru moved first, his hands forming seals as his shadow stretched forward, reaching for the attackers. Shadow Possession Jutsu! The shadows moved quickly, slipping between the branches and wrapping around the brothers' feet before they could react. The demon brothers tried to pull free, but Shikamaru held them in place, forcing their movements to mirror his. Now, Hinata! He called. Hinata, with her Byakugan still activated, closed the distance in an instant. She struck with her gentle fist, hitting the chakra points on their arms and legs with precise accuracy. Her strikes disrupted the flow of chakra in the brothers' bodies, rendering them unable to use jutsu or even move effectively. The demon brothers grunted in pain, their arms falling limply to their sides as the effects of Hinata's strikes took hold. Naruto stood back, watching the duo work seamlessly together. He noted how Hinata's Byakugan had given them the early advantage, and how Shikamaru's quick thinking had immobilized their opponents before they could launch a full attack. Once the demon brothers were completely subdued, Asuma stepped forward, eyeing the defeated shinobi with a wary expression. Nicely handled, both of you, he said, a hint of pride in his voice. You spotted the threat early and used each other's strengths to make quick work of them. Shikamaru let out a relaxed sigh, his shadow technique released as he scratched the back of his head. Just lucky we had Hinata's eyes, he said nonchalantly, though there was a hint of admiration in his tone. Hinata blushed slightly, offering a small, humble smile as she deactivated her Byakugan. I couldn't have done it without Shikamaru's strategy. With the demon brothers bound and lying on the side of the path, Team 10 took a moment to regroup. Asuma knelt down, his sharp gaze examining the attackers while his team kept a vigilant watch on their surroundings. After a moment, Asuma reached into his vest, pulling out the well-worn bingo book, an index of known enemy shinobi, their backgrounds and threat levels. He flipped through the pages, scanning until he stopped on a familiar set of faces. He raised an eyebrow. These two, he muttered, glancing back at the unconscious men, are the demon brothers of the hidden mist. Shikamaru peered over his shoulder, his usual relaxed expression replaced with a slight frown. Hidden mist? What would shinobi from that village be doing all the way out here? Hinata's eyes widened, her gaze shifting to Tazuna, who was avoiding eye contact and muttering nervously to himself. Asuma stood, sliding the bingo book back into his vest as he fixed Tazuna with a probing look. Tazuna, care to explain why a couple of missing nin would be targeting you on what's supposed to be a straightforward escort mission? Tazuna gulped, tugging at his collar. I may have left out a small detail or two about my situation, he mumbled, glancing away. Asuma's expression hardened. This small detail put my team in unnecessary danger. I suggest you start talking, and fast. The bridge builder hesitated, wringing his hands. After a moment, he sighed heavily, his shoulders sagging. All right, I'll tell you everything. But please, understand, I had no choice. I need your help. Team 10 exchanged glances, the weight of the mission suddenly feeling far heavier than it had just moments ago. Asuma's gaze remained fixed on Tazuna, his voice low but firm. We'll listen, but this changes things. You owe us the truth from here on out. With the demon brothers subdued and the revelation sinking in, Team 10 prepared to hear the full truth behind Tazuna's mission, knowing that whatever he shared could lead them into far deeper waters than they had anticipated. The team moved steadily along the forest path, their footsteps crunching softly against the fallen leaves and branches. Tazuna adjusted his pack, glancing back at the group. So, kids, ever thought about building something as big as a bridge? He asked, his tone casual. Shikamaru let out a lazy sigh. Can't say that I have. Sounds like a hassle. All that planning, drawing up blueprints, gathering supplies. Hinata tilted her head slightly, curiosity sparking in her gaze. It must feel rewarding, though, to build something that'll help so many people. Tazuna chuckled, adjusting the hat on his head. Rewarding, sure, but there are days you just want to toss your tools into the river and call it quits. Asuma laughed softly. Sounds like you know a thing or two about patience, Tazuna-san. Naruto walked at the back, silent as he scanned the path ahead. His attention flickered to Tazuna for a moment, then back to the trail. He didn't add much, but his sharp gaze occasionally checked on his teammates as they talked. So, Tazuna continued, eyeing Shikamaru. What about you? Any big dreams? What do you want to build, strategist? Shikamaru shrugged, kicking a rock off the path. Build? Nah, I'll stick with cloud watching. Less trouble that way. Tazuna let out a loud laugh. Cloud watching, huh? That's a first. And what about you, young lady? He asked, turning to Hinata. Hinata blushed faintly, her voice soft but clear. I want to help my family and my clan, she said. And I'd like to get stronger, to protect those who need it. Tazuna nodded thoughtfully. Noble goals. You're a quiet one, but I get the feeling you're tougher than you look. Shikamaru chuckled, glancing back at Naruto. And our teammate back there? I think he'd rather just get to the mission. Naruto's gaze flickered over to them briefly, but he simply nodded, his focus returning to the road without saying much. Well, he's right about one thing, Asuma chimed in, smirking. Naruto here is all about moving forward. Speaking of which, how's everyone feeling about their first mission outside the village? Hinata glanced at Naruto, then back to Asuma. It's exciting, but I know there'll be challenges too. Shikamaru grinned. Exciting? Sure. I'll just let Naruto do the heavy lifting. Naruto smirked faintly, his eyes scanning the trail ahead. Fine by me, he said quietly with a casual shrug. The group chuckled as they continued on, the banter lightening the mood as they approached the next leg of their journey. As they walked along the path toward Tazuna's village, the atmosphere was oddly still. The faint rustling of leaves was the only sound, but Hinata's Byakugan picked up on something else, a shift in the chakra around them. Hinata's eyes narrowed as she whispered, Asuma-sensei, there's something up with this mist up. Asuma gave a subtle nod, keeping his gaze forward, though his senses were now on high alert. Good catch, Hinata. Everyone, stay close and be ready. They continued walking, but Naruto could sense the unease among his teammates. Shikamaru's eyes were darting around, mapping out potential escape routes in his mind, while Hinata's gaze stayed fixed ahead, tracking any movement in the trees. Naruto's fingers twitched slightly, feeling the subtle buzz of chakra building in his palms. A sudden pressure washed over them, a dense, suffocating aura that made even the air feel thick. In an instant, a figure appeared on a tree branch, a massive sword strapped to his back. The man wore a twisted smile, his eyes gleaming with a predatory gaze. Well, looks like I found some entertainment on my way, the man sneered, looking directly at Asuma and then down at the team. Asuma's expression remained calm, but his tone was serious. Zabuza Momochi, huh? He muttered, recognizing the figure from his own encounters and whispers in the bingo book. Ah, so you know me. Good. Then you know what's coming, Zabuza replied, a chilling tone in his voice. Asuma glanced back at his team. Listen up, he said, his voice clear and firm. Hinata, Shikamaru, Naruto, take Tazuna and move into a defensive formation. Now, keep him protected at all costs. Shikamaru, looking tense but composed, nodded. Got it, sensei. Let's move. They formed a tight cluster around Tazuna, positioning themselves defensively. Shikamaru positioned himself at the back, his shadow manipulation ready to be deployed, while Hinata took the front, her Byakugan scanning for any sudden attacks. Naruto flanked Tazuna's left side, staying silent as he monitored Zabuza's movements with a calm, calculating gaze. Zabuza's eyes flicked to the team with a hint of amusement. What's this? You think a couple of kids are going to stop me? He taunted, his grin widening. Asuma stepped forward, his knuckles cracking as he prepared himself for the confrontation. You're not getting past me, Zabuza. If you want the bridge builder, you'll have to go through me first. Naruto glanced over at Shikamaru, who looked at him with a wry smile. This just got complicated, huh? Naruto gave a slight nod, his gaze fixed on Zabuza's figure. Nothing we can't handle. We just have to keep him back. Hinata's voice was low but steady as she chimed in. If we stay alert, we can protect Tazuna-san. I'll watch for any movement. Tazuna, wide-eyed and shaken, muttered, This is what I signed up for? He looked at Naruto, his face pale. You sure you kids can handle this? Naruto's reply was simple. Yes. Hinata, keep your Byakugan active, Shikamaru instructed, his voice calm but focused. I'll cover our backs. Naruto, be ready if he tries to break through. Hinata nodded, her eyes flaring with chakra as she monitored their surroundings, her voice steady. I'll alert you if I see any shifts in his movement. Zabuza laughed, his voice echoing ominously. All this fuss for one bridge builder? Fine. Show me what you've got, Konoha. Asuma gave his team one last look, his expression filled with both pride and warning. Remember, stay focused and don't let your guard down. I'll handle Zabuza. With that, Asuma turned back toward Zabuza, his stance firm as the two prepared for a fierce clash. The team stood their ground, their senses heightened, ready to defend their charge as the battle between their sensei and the rogue shinobi began. The mist grew thicker as Asuma and Zabuza faced off, their eyes locked in a silent exchange of intent. The tension in the air was palpable, each ninja calculating their next move with razor-sharp focus. Without another word, both leapt into action. Asuma was the first to strike, his trench knives glowing with chakra as he sliced through the mist, aiming straight for Zabuza's chest. Zabuza reacted instantly, blocking with his massive sword, sparks flying from the collision. With a swift motion, he pushed Asuma back and swung his blade in a wide arc, aiming for Asuma's midsection. Asuma twisted out of the way, narrowly avoiding the blow, then countered with a burst of chakra-infused shurikens. The projectiles sliced through the air, but Zabuza deflected each one with expert precision, his sword moving with lethal fluidity. He smirked, vanishing into the mist as quickly as he had appeared. Asuma paused, listening for any sign of movement, his senses honed to their peak. He knew Zabuza was a master of the hidden mist technique, and the dense fog would give him the advantage. Focusing his chakra, Asuma prepared for Zabuza's next move. The silence was shattered as Zabuza appeared directly behind him, blade already in motion. Asuma spun around just in time, his trench knives colliding with Zabuza's sword in a shower of sparks. The impact sent a shockwave through the air, both ninja holding their ground, each testing the other's strength. Not bad for a leaf shinobi, Zabuza sneered, pushing Asuma back with a burst of strength. Asuma didn't respond, instead weaving through a series of hand seals. Fire style, ash pile burning, he roared, exhaling a thick cloud of ash that filled the air, sparking with embers that crackled ominously. Zabuza's eyes widened as he dodged back, but the ash cloud exploded, sending a wave of fire surging toward him. He swung his sword in a wide arc, deflecting the flames, though some of the embers singed his arm. He grimaced but recovered quickly, his eyes flashing with a renewed intensity. In response, Zabuza formed hand seals of his own, summoning a torrent of water that rose up and crashed toward Asuma with brutal force. Water style, water dragon jutsu. The water formed into a massive dragon that surged forward, aiming to engulf Asuma. Asuma braced himself, but he couldn't dodge in time. The dragon struck him head-on, knocking him back several feet. He hit the ground hard, rolling before regaining his footing, his breathing labored. Before he could fully recover, Zabuza was upon him again, moving with deadly precision as he aimed another strike toward Asuma's neck. The leaf Junin blocked with his trench knives, but Zabuza's strength was relentless. Asuma deflected the blow, twisting his body to deliver a swift knee to Zabuza's ribs. The strike landed, and Zabuza grunted in pain, but retaliated instantly, sweeping his sword in a low arc that forced Asuma to jump back. They both paused, breathing heavily, their eyes locked in silent acknowledgement of each other's skill. Neither was willing to back down, despite the injuries accumulating with each exchange. Zabuza moved first, vanishing into the mist once more. Asuma closed his eyes for a moment, feeling out Zabuza's chakra, ready to react at the slightest hint of movement. Suddenly, Zabuza reappeared, his sword aiming directly for Asuma's throat. Asuma blocked, but this time, Zabuza's blade slipped past his defenses, grazing his neck. Blood spurted from the shallow but dangerous wound, and Asuma clenched his jaw in pain. He retaliated, his trench knife glowing with chakra as he sliced forward, catching Zabuza across the gut. Zabuza grunted, feeling the sting of the wound, though it wasn't deep enough to incapacitate him. Both ninjas staggered back, each clutching their wounds, their eyes narrowed in fierce determination. Before either could strike again, a figure appeared in the mist, a masked figure, holding a kunai. "Zabuza," the voice said calmly. Zabuza's eyes flicked to the newcomer, recognition flashing across his face. With a final glare at Asuma, he nodded. "Looks like you live another day," he sneered, allowing the figure to guide him away. Asuma watched them disappear into the mist, his body tense and ready for another attack. But none came. The dense fog slowly dissipated, leaving the clearing eerily quiet. Wiping the blood from his neck, Asuma turned to his team, who had been standing at a distance, shielding Tazuna as instructed. Shikamaru and Hinata immediately rushed forward, concern evident on their faces. "Naruto," Asuma called, his voice steady despite the pain. "The emergency medical scroll." Naruto nodded, retrieving the scroll from his pack and activating the basic medical supplies. Hinata moved in quickly, applying pressure to Asuma's neck wound, her hands trembling slightly as she focused. "This isn't as bad as it looks," Asuma assured them, though his voice was strained. "Still, you need rest," Shikamaru said, his usual lazy tone replaced with a note of urgency. "And we need a safe place to regroup." Tazuna, watching with wide eyes, cleared his throat. "My home is close by. You can rest there." Asuma gave a nod. "That'll have to do. Hinata, keep an eye on our surroundings. Shikamaru, lead the way." The team moved quickly, supporting Asuma as they made their way to Tazuna's home. Once they arrived, Asuma sent a messenger hawk back to Konoha, requesting backup and additional supplies, his message urgent and precise. As they settled into Tazuna's house, a heavy silence filled the room. Each of them understood the danger they now faced and the uncertainty of the mission that lay ahead. After a day's rest, Asuma gathered Team 10 in the small clearing behind Tazuna's house. His neck wound was still bandaged, and though he moved carefully, his sharp gaze remained steady. He called Naruto over with a nod, gesturing for him to sit beside him on a fallen log. "You're progressing fast, Naruto," Asuma began, his tone steady. "But there's something you need to understand about wind chakra. It's more than just force. Wind can be a weapon, but it's also about precision and patience." Naruto listened intently, his face as unreadable as ever, though his focus was evident. Asuma continued, "Think of wind as a silent blade. It can be subtle, unseen, yet deadly if wielded right. You've already started with the basics, but to master it, you'll need to focus more on control than speed. Let the wind work for you." Naruto nodded, absorbing every word. Asuma had provided the guidance he needed, and with a new resolve, he spent the rest of the day practicing. He focused on refining the blade of wind technique, trying to move beyond its initial form. It was as if Asuma's words had opened a new door in his mind, revealing hidden potential within the wind element he hadn't realized was there before. By the late afternoon, Naruto found himself in a secret forest, a ways away from Tazuna's house. His efforts began to pay off. He discovered a way to harness his chakra into silent, razor-sharp slices of wind, turning them into invisible projectiles. The wind moved silently, slicing through small branches in the forest with ease. Naruto tested it again, watching the effect with a sense of satisfaction. He had taken his skill to a new level. Naruto continued his training in the forest as dusk settled in, perfecting the technique Asuma had encouraged him to refine. Each silent slice of wind chakra sliced cleanly through the trees around him, and he felt the thrill of control, the power at his fingertips sharper and more precise than ever. He was about to try a final variation when he heard the soft sound of someone plucking herbs nearby. Naruto paused, his gaze cutting through the trees until he saw a figure kneeling among the foliage, gathering plants with calm, deliberate movements. Naruto narrowed his eyes, watching closely. Something felt off. He made no sound, yet the figure paused, looking up and meeting his gaze. The person straightened and turned to face him, mask still obscuring their features. Naruto took in the sight, recalling the form and attire from the bridge encounter with Zabuza. A moment passed in silence before the masked figure removed their mask, revealing the calm, almost kind face of the hunter Nin. "Didn't expect anyone else out here," Haku said evenly, his gaze meeting Naruto's. Naruto's stance remained steady, his hand by his side still charged with a faint aura of wind chakra. "So, you're the one who helped Zabuza," he replied, his tone flat, neither accusing nor surprised. Haku nodded calmly, unfazed. Yes, and you're part of the team protecting the bridge builder. It seems we're in quite an unusual encounter." They stood in silence for a moment, each observing the other. The hunter Nin's expression softened slightly, a hint of curiosity in his eyes. "My name is Haku," he said, his voice carrying a calm openness. He tilted his head with a slight smile. "And you? What's your name?" Naruto paused briefly before replying. "Naruto." A quiet settled over them, both sizing up the other as if seeking something deeper beneath the surface. Haku's gaze held a genuine interest. "Naruto," he began, his voice gentle, "do you have someone precious you'd give your life to protect?" The question lingered in the air between them, weighted with unspoken meaning. Naruto's expression remained still. "I don't fight to protect others. That's not what I'm about." Haku tilted his head, his gaze unwavering. "Then what drives you? Power alone?" "Power is the only way to break free from everything that holds you back," Naruto said coolly, his gaze unyielding. "With enough strength, no one can control you. No one can tell you what to do. You can make your own path." Haku looked thoughtful, almost sorrowful. "But power can be a shackle too. It can trap you in a cycle of fighting and domination." Naruto's expression didn't change. "Only if you let it. Power for yourself, power that no one else can take from you, is freedom. When you rely on others, you're bound by their limitations and decisions. I'd rather be alone than shackled to someone else's vision." Haku's gaze softened, though he didn't look away. "I've chosen to serve Zabuza because he gave me a place in this world. When you're born with nothing, finding someone to live for can be a purpose in itself." Naruto shook his head, almost amused at the idea. "That's just another cage, living by someone else's orders. That's not freedom. It's being a tool." He took a slow step forward, his eyes sharp. "I'd rather live and die on my own terms. Power gives you that choice." Haku's eyes lingered on Naruto, the faintest shadow of sadness crossing his face. "Then we're truly different. For me, freedom doesn't mean anything without someone to share it with. My loyalty to Zabuza is my choice. It's not weakness." Naruto's response was a cold, simple shrug. "Doesn't make a difference to me." He paused, his tone growing sharper. "Anyone who lives for someone else's ambition is bound to fall with them. I don't plan on making that mistake." Haku's calm gaze remained steady. "Perhaps one day you'll find something beyond power. Perhaps one day you'll understand." Naruto's eyes narrowed. He was done talking. In a split-second movement, he flickered behind Haku, his blade of wind chakra poised, silent and deadly. The strike was swift and calculated, cutting through the air in a near-invisible arc. Haku gasped as the wind blade connected, his body tensing from the impact. Naruto flickered back, already watching for any counterattack. Haku staggered, clutching his side as he turned to face Naruto, a hint of surprise and pain flashing in his gaze. They stood in silence, and Haku's eyes softened with something almost like respect as he struggled to stay upright, his hand pressing against the wound. The night closed around them, with only the rustle of leaves breaking the tension in the air.